It looks like we are recording. It is February 22nd, 2019. I'm here with Carl Luckenbach and with his wife, Carol. You want to say hi, Carol?
Hi.
All right. In fact, go over there with Carl just for a second. These videos are the most professional, so we get everyone here together.
All righty.
All right.
Let me get rid of my glasses.
Now, Carl and I met about 5-6 years ago when we were up in right around Detroit. I've forgotten the town, but we were able to save this. Craig Johnson and I went and brought the car down and said, save the car. My God, it's out here with Fiberglass Farms. Well, we keep telling the same story. This is the place we have as our holding area for cars. So Carl is down here with his wife every winter, is that right, in Jacksonville?
Right.
And we've convinced him, you at least gave an opportunity every year to come on down and look at the car. And he said, the car's done. So he just, no, it's not done. We're getting ready to start. We have a new chassis, getting ready for the motor plant and so forth. So Carl's come down here with his car today, and although it looks a lot like it did when we saw it a few years ago, we now have another chassis ready to go. We now have engine plans, and we've talked to you about some of your intentions. Like this particular car we're just talking about, it doesn't have any doors, but that was, you had mentioned, did you plan on having doors or no doors with this car?
I'm not sure, but I don't think we ever really planned on doors.
Now, what was the concern about doors back then? Because you mentioned that earlier.
That they would really impair the structural stability of the shell, the fiberglass shell.
Yeah, and that was very common. Companies like Glaspar early on were very afraid about putting doors in because they thought that you'd end up with two halves of a car.
Right.
So your concern was right on target for the time. They eventually got through that. Now, did you design this car based on any other car, or how did you come up with the design on it?
Probably based on Italian design of that period.
Yeah, it's very pretty, the oval. And
I really like those things.
And how did you choose the power, the drivetrain, which is a Lincoln?
It kind of fell into our lap. A Lincoln dealer knew my father, knew that we were working on this car, and he said, well, I've got an engine sitting on a display stand in the showroom, and he said it's about time I got rid of it.
Ah, so this is a brand new engine.
So it was a brand new
Well,
engine.
let's take a look at the engine. Let's take a look. Get you up here.
Is it in here?
Yeah, well, we'll find. I hope it's still in there. We'll find out. Out here at the farms, you never know. Let's see. Now move this thing back. There's an engine.
Well, there's an engine.
All right, it's a Lincoln engine.
Super.
Now, we actually have pulled it apart. The engine at this point, when we picked up the car a few years ago, had been sitting in the same place outside for about 50 years. So we do know the engine still has oil, which is golden on the downside, the bottom end, but the engine actually is locked up all top. So we don't know if we can save this or not. We actually have another engine that we purchased, identical to this, that we can use, but I'm going to see, we take it apart, if it actually can be used or not, because it certainly has no, we checked the oil, it looks like it was put in yesterday. So this is, and you can see here when we bought the car, or got the car, the fiberglass firewall was in place, and you can see the structure, you made that round tube, and that's very typical. That's why the structure here in the front and any structure in the back holds both sides of the body, so putting doors in it really wouldn't be a problem. We just need to go off of the tube structure if we put doors in it, and that's where they would be hinged at, and make sure the rest of it's mounted properly too. So there's a few things you did on this car. One of them, this you can see from down here, is a straight axle. So that's not independent front suspension, but a straight axle with just one spring. And the spring is underneath the cross member there.
Yeah.
So we're advancing the chassis 1 year into a shoebox, so we have independent front suspension. And the other thing that's kind of interesting, I know you don't remember doing this, but you can see the longitudinal springs in the back. Since I'm only the third owner, at some point, this is really thick fiberglass, really thick. But you put longitudinal springs, which would have been characteristic of the shoebox chassis, which we're going to be using. So we already identified in the chassis, the reason we're coming up with another chassis is it sat outside on the ground for like 50 years, and the center part of the chassis has been compromised. So we will hit your original idea, but with longitudinal springs in the back, and then with independent suspension up front, it should drive better. We'll probably put doors in, though, so we can get you in. So,
You were going to leap in?
Yeah, well, back then I could.
well, you can still leap in. Maybe, I bet you can crawl in now. If we put you in,
Probably.
I have to crawl in. I couldn't get over it.
Oh,
So
that's super.
it did. This damage here did not occur during the hurricane. This happened up north. It was some tree fell down up where the car was. but that's relatively easy to fix. It's got a very attractive rack. Yeah. And big tires and all too. No dashboard, no. I think this is a steering post, but you know that has to all be changed over when we get it.
It did have a steering
Did it?
column.
Oh yeah, I do remember now. Yeah.
And it was offset. It had a universal joint to about halfway up.
Gotcha. Okay, and so forth. So I don't know. I hope you see the fiberglass is still in very nice shape.
Yeah.
Fiberglass Farms is kind to it. As long as there's no hurricanes here, it's kind to it. If there's a hurricane, it's not kind to it. And you can see it's in some fair company with the Wow Cadillac and the DM Nacional and some other cars out there in the forest. So once we start this, hopefully this year, we got to get some other cars moved. But once we do, we'll see if you guys back. When do you leave back to? What time of the year do you go back to Ann Arbor? May?
Early May.
And then when do you come back?
October,
Thanksgiving.
November.
Yeah, probably this fall. We'll see where we are. So, what color were you going to paint the car? Because this is a primer red,
Yeah.
and then bucket seats or a bench seat.
Bucket.
Bucket seats, and this was an automatic. Did you ever want to do anything other than automatic?
Yes, I did. But the engine came with the transmission attached.
Okay. What transmission would you have used? Or what did you want ideally?
I didn't know the best source for a 4-speed manual. But that would have been my first choice.
4-speed manual?
Yeah.
Gotcha. More like a Jaguar or something. I'm not.
Yeah.
We usually just end up using the Ford. Most of our cars have the Ford flathead and Ford setup. So very few have, unless they modernize the transmission. Usually they'll go with a vintage engine, and it's not unusual to have a modern transmission behind it. Brakes and so forth are vintage. So now, when you were working on this, you worked on it for more than 1 year. So
Yeah.
it was in your garage for your family house.
Right.
And how many years do you think you started when you were 17? Is that what you said?
Maybe,
High school?
Maybe even 16.
So you were still in high school when you started it.
Right.
And then you left. You stopped working about what age?
About 19, maybe.
So had you started Cranbrook at college yet, or?
I'd finished.
Oh, really?
And I was at the University of Michigan by then.
Okay, so
And that's one of the reasons that's when the progress stopped.
Mhm.
That's- it,
so freshman, sophomore, junior, you left the car at your father's house.
well, in a rental garage a block away.
Okay, near your family's house. I gotcha. Okay, and then did you know it's still? I remember asking about it. I've forgotten the answer. When I contacted you a few years ago, the people who owned it knew whose car it was, but did you know it still existed?
No, I didn't, and I don't know how they knew who owned it.
Yeah, well, that was the second owners. They had bought it right from, they said your father,
Yeah, that's true.
and they wrote down and they looked at the bill of sale and so forth, and they still had it all too. So they said they drove it a little bit. They drove it around the block, started it up.
Yeah.
It would have been the 70s.
That's about all I ever did with it.
Yeah, but they hadn't. He always was going to work on it. Still a good guy. Randy is his name, and as I remember, and we're going to keep him posted as we make progress too, because it was in his place for a long, long time, 40, 50 years. It's 1970 something through 2015 or so. Neat.
Yeah.
All right. Are we doing wire wheels on the car? What are we supposed to put in there?
I don't know.
What did you gonna?
Can you still buy them?
Oh, you buy anything. What kind of wheels were you going to use?
Wire wheels, probably Rudge Whitworth, Barani.
Yeah, I've got a set of Baranis actually. I could put them on this car. This would look really pretty. Got one set that came with the car. All right, well, if we got to do this car, well, you can still enjoy driving it.
Yeah.
Or at least driving a passenger. Well, thanks for your time today, Carl.
Well, thank you, Jeff.
And we appreciate it, and we'll keep you posted hopefully later this year.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.